outstanding team and dear authorities, colleagues from around the world who are watching me right now from the LG's family. I feel really honored to be here to talk to you about a really important part of our company in order for its well development. But first of all, I am going to introduce myself for the ones who doesn't know me yet. So I am Dr. Valerie Valeska Lozada Rodriguez, the current LG's Human Resource Manager. And as you can see here, and as I told you at the beginning, I am gladly going to be talking about an important part of the company, which is the recruitment and staff selection, and specific the personnel. So let's start by saying that we in LG, we work with 5 main edges that the personnel selection process requires, and we consider them important. So we first going to begin with the recruitment procedure. As you can see in the screen, is the first step of this procedure. Then we're going to move on to the most competent employee, meaning having a personal or a real life situation with the interview or the candidate. Then we are going to review the legal security documentations from the Colombian government policies, and then job references are going to be fundamental in the fourth step to make some comparisons. And finally, we're going to end up with the medical diagnosis revision. So let's start with the first recruitment process, which is starting point of this personal selection. So in this case, we have, as you can see, a place profile that we already developed in the last session that we have with our team in the Human Resource Office. So welcome back again with this presentation. And as you can see here, we know all the functions. And now that we have this in order, we have to, let's say, have a better approach on how we are going to pre-select the personnel. In this case, we can have 2 methods of research. First, we're going to go to an internal methodology in which we're going to be calling it as a promotion of the personnel, because we're going to look for people that are our current employees, but they can take this position, which it can be superior or it can have a better, a more advanced responsibility. So this is going to give a motivational factor of progression, meaning the advancement, and is going to boost their performance in the long run. However, we have another methodology in case we cannot find a specific person for this job lot in concern, and we can go through some web pages like Sona Jobs, Empleo.com, and Jobomas, in which we're going to review some CVs, personal or academical background, and we have to have in detail the personnel functions per each job position that we're looking for. Okay, so that's why the place profile or the personal function description was a really important step to do before. Then, well, here we have an example of this web page that is called Jobomas, in which we have to detail all the functions that the job position requires. And we can find or publish the jobs through some other social media like LinkedIn, which is popular, or Facebook too. Through advertisements, we can have a really good contact. Then we are going to move on with the competent employee, and then in this part is essential. This is the most important one, let's say, because we're going to meet the person. And we have to make or develop an interview. And why we have as a company to develop it? Well, we have 4 main reasons. The first is to identify feelings while interacting, because we're going to have a face-to-face session. Then we're going to recognize the ethnic descendant gender per individual, meaning the customs, but without generalizing, because we're just talking with that person in specific. Then we're going to evidence in real time the emotional part, which is an important intelligence. We can be really cognitive and really clever in many skills or in many grounds, but the emotional part is going to support us to develop the tasks in a way that we reach the expectations of the company. So we need to take that into consideration for the interview and recognize those aspects, and of course allows us to have an appropriate or a ad hoc study, meaning a direct without intrusive, but at the same time is going to be versatile. Well, as interviewers, we need to develop some certain abilities that are four mainly. First, stipulate the guidelines of the interview, in this case, in order to, let's say, break this ice and let the person be a bit more comfortable and aware of how the interview is going to take or the main edges that is going to approach. Then we have to be or develop this skill of empathic listening. And this is important for make a really good environment. Then the verbal and non-verbal coherent language, even though now verbal is the most predominant expression, since we have every single personal selection through computer, non-verbal coherent language and communication is going to support us really well in order to make our points clear. And finally, being willing and prepared mentally. Okay, this means know ourselves before, and we have to have a previous preparation in order to focus all our attention to our interviewer candidate. Okay, we cannot get lost in our thoughts, and we have to know every single detail from their academical, professional, and personal background of this person. Okay. Then we have some features that are going to be really highly predominant along the interview, and they're going to have or get the interviewed attention. First, we need to be well presented as a dress code. We need to have a good presentation of the accessories that we can use. Do not exaggerate them, but at the same time, do not be as conservative or formal as it is demanded, but let's say a relaxed outfit that we can have. This will enable us to develop certain skills such as the good attitude, be positive, optimistic, and well, now we have to be objective. In this case, this means, this is also highly linked with being neutral, without discriminations or associations, as I told you before. We need to just focus on what the interview is taking or is going, because we cannot just get lost or be moved by our emotions. We need to be or have a very objective thinking rather than a subjective one without involving feelings. Okay, then in detail analyzer and note taker, since we have some variables of the personal function description that we already have, we can add some extra information that we can identify in the middle of the interview that can be surprise or can be useful in the future in order to select the best qualified personnel. And this is going to be allowed by having a pleasant talkative emotion and let the person express themselves fully. Finally, having being a great listening, because we have had already an enriching preparation as an interviewer of LG of the company, and in a way we are representing its image in front of them. Otherwise, we are going to fail by demonstrating the wrong perception of our company, and we need to demonstrate that we actually have a qualified personnel. We need those qualified people in our company to develop certain tasks that is going to boost their future performance in the future. And well, that's for the interview. Really nice approach. We can have some tests through face reader machines or softwares, as you can see here. For instance, in this case, those machines, okay, to experience or be aware of this relationship in between leadership and emotions, deriving ethical classes. So those classes can be identify or classify people that we interview as intuitive, dynamic, reflective, and perceptual. So if we identify, for example, more surprising emotions, okay, we're going to deduce that the person is a dreamer, therefore a more intuitive one. If we find out that the person can get angry easily or is disgusted, but at the same time is energized, due to this factor, this is why this person is a bit more dynamic. Even though it cannot be related at first, it is actually true, because sometimes they can feel challenged along the interview or the questions that we are going to develop during the session. If we notice that the person is neutral, maybe she or he is more reflective, he's more analyzer, therefore it will have a different perception. And finally, if we notice more happiness, emotions of optimistic ones, we're going to deduce that this person is a very perceptual one. And this person has the most predominant emotion as neutral and happy. So we can say that this person is a very reflective, but at the same time perceptual. Okay. Well, now we're going to move on to the selection of test trustworthy. In this case, we're going to see three main attitude tests. The first one is the triadic mental coefficient. In this case, we are going to evaluate the current job style of the interviewed, meaning if he or she is more operative, innovative, or maybe he's a bit more rational. If he's operated, he is going to work in specific things. That's why it is important to ask some hobbies, the things they like to do or develop in their leisure times. If the person is innovative, he is going to be more creative and fit better in offices like marketing or sales, for instance. And if the person is a bit more rational, he is going to be a thinker. He is going to prefer to just face challenges in silence. Okay, so here are some 5 examples of questions of this triadic mental test revealer. I put myself as an example, and you can see that for each question you have a specific figure that represent each of these styles of job that the person can have. In my case, the predominant ones were rationality and innovation. Then we're going to move on to this attitude test. There are those two in terms of cognitive abilities as well as personality. Cognitive abilities, or more also known as CI tests, can develop or measure multiple aspects such as the memory, vocabulary, verbal fluency, and numerical evaluations. And it could be divided in tests like, for instance, the Wonderlic in groups, the Wessler, which is an individual one, and finally, for teenagers and adults, the Kaufman. These are generated by psychologists, so these are a bit more complex. However, I am not saying that they cannot be important. I'm just saying that it's like a bit more, it demands a bit more time and a bit more procedures and people to help us generate them. Finally, we have the personality. We can take this instead or as an option. This personality test of the 16 personality factors created by Cattle, a famous psychologist, and he evaluates in this test 16 aspects. Some of them that I can mention really important. The suspicion is, for instance, that it measures intuition, cunning, imagination, right? The self-control of a person. And as you can see in your right-hand side, you can find some examples of the questions that you can find the questionnaire. And the person basically is going to answer if he totally agrees or disagrees per each statement described. Okay, so yeah, And this personality test in a specific it can be a structural test that, well, that has a retest. And why do I say that it has a retest? We already are evaluating the person. Well, the questions, if the interviewer, the candidate is going to develop, have some of them are going to be similar in between, but they are not going to be close to each one. This is going to let us know if the person is actually being honest or as transparent as we ask them to do in these personality tests. Okay, we can instead take the polygraph as a complementation of the interview if necessary. And well, the personality tests are projective also. We can find these modalities of pencil and paper through draws. At the end, we're going to know if the person has a really high personality or medium or a lower one instead. Both structural and projective tests, meaning a quantitative or a qualitative evaluation, measure 4 main aspects of the person and the candidate that we are looking for the job position in specific. The interpersonal relationships that they can develop, the emotional control, as I told you, self-control is key fundamental part in order to develop our cognitive skills. Responsibility of the job position that is going to be undertaken in the future. And finally, the works rhythm of the person, how he or she is going to perform at the end, or their preferences in the working environment. Okay, so being said that, we have added aptitude tests, which are more of like how the person is going to be, or if the person is skilled enough for the job position. We already know how is the person. Now we have to understand how much the person has in their cognitive skills to develop that job. Okay, so this is done by you as interviewers, and you can, I don't know, maybe present an example of a hypothetical situation that you have experienced before in the same job position that you're looking for, and maybe they can answer you throughout an activity in the middle of the session, or maybe a theoretical answer. Okay, so you put the person in the real situation. Finally, the interview plus the personality test, as well as the face reader machine, and if necessary, the polygraph evaluation, and of course the simulations, are going to derive you to have the best personal selection for the company and for LG's progression. Okay. Let's move on with some legal security aspects, okay? And first, we have here, for instance, some certifications that we are going to be generating. First, we have the Attorney's Office certification, which its purpose is fundamentally to understand and pay attention to some corruption issues or labor problems, meaning the breaches that the person could have had in the past, as well as disciplinary behaviors. Okay. Well, as per in terms of permissions, we as a private company, we are all authorized to take possessions over the background information. Before it was forbidden, but now we can like have this access to obtain. Well, this content, the certification contents are divided in legal charges with the government and historical contracts with official entities. Doesn't matter if they are public or private. And well, in order to obtain this background information, we just need to go to this web page linked of the disciplinary record certificate from the Attorney's General's Office. We can find 2 types, the ordinary for any job position, person or business, but also we can have, or we can generate a special one because the public environment is involved, like the job position is a bit more important in this case, like mayors, conciliars, etc., judges. So the ID and the full name of the person that we are interviewing or we have already pre-select are required. Here's an example. For instance, to consult the specific certification, you put the number of this of the background of the person, and then you are going to generate the certification, um, and it can be downloaded, as you can see here in number 2, in the option number 2. In option number 3, you just verify the certification generation, meaning in which state or statute it is. And well, after that, you can generate it and download it too, and see the progress, okay? Then we have this National Police Prosecutor's Office certification that, well, in order to generate the judicial background certification, the National Police is in charge to develop them. In this case, the General Attorney's Office cannot certificate them. That's why it will derive you directly to the National Police webpage. You can consult this permanently and the 24 hours, and just by accepting the personal data procession and manipulation, okay? Then, well, we have here the example. You just type the ID number and just certify that you're not a robot, and therefore the certification is going to be auto-generated automatically in the system, okay? Then we have the comptroller as the third certification, or the certification from the audit office. And well, this certification is regarding taxes, such as the tax evasion or discipline aspects are considered as well. It can be done or generated in 2 formats: for natural person or as legal, meaning as a firm or as a business. And it will generate you a certification automatically with all the description of the person, taxes, charges in terms of rent, and also the payment status, okay? You just go to that web page link that is over there, and it will derive you to this portal, in which you select, as I told you, you put the ID number, and it will be generated and able to be downloaded afterwards. Then we have the security study, okay, which this is just to make sure, because you already have really 3 strong certificates from the attorneys, from the National Police Office, and the comptroller. Now you have to develop a security study to assure the person's background, since sometimes there are some illegal procedures in terms of falsifications. So its purpose is to avoid impersonations when undertaking a relevant position in our company, if they're going to be involved with money or confidence, right? So before this study, we need to have its signature in an informed consent document, okay? And this is developed since here, for instance, around 34% of CVs are graded as not trustworthy because they have falsification, penalty backgrounds, etc. In this case, you can find in the previous webpage link that some clauses are written in this security test to take into consideration. For instance, recent studies, validations from institutions, and graphological analysis, meaning trustworthiness and honesty. Latest job references, documentation's authenticity, and finally here we have also some data records in public institutions, which are mainly important. Since FOSIGA, which is a security and guarantee fund related with the medical issues, is a fund that, well, we need to verify if the person has a debt with the health provider in concern. Okay, so therefore we are going to be enabled to evaluate if the person is up to undertake this kind of job position. He or she is well prepared enough to confront those legal compromises. Number 4, we have job references, which are basically experience, habits, the character itself, and the skills that the person can have. So we're going to be more aware of our candidates, and we can have or use them as point comparisons, or in order to evaluate if the person has told us the truth, and the information that we already have per each candidate is in accordance with what others can say about them, can be, for example, their historical companies that they have worked or family members, okay? Or any other authority that knows the candidate, of course. Finally, the fifth step is the medical diagnosis procedure, in which we are going to be, for example, taking some occupational medicine exams. And this is in order to know if the work coexistence is feasible in terms of risk of ergonomics. Ergonomics are some specific measures in the conditions of the work environment: the light, the temperature, the smells, the toxic elements, or any other chemicals that the person is going to be exposed. And that is why the blood test is taken. And the body part test is to check the main body parts, such as hands or the eyes of the person, and he or she is available to develop the job that we are looking for. The mechanisms to take those medical diagnoses are two. We have first the IPS, or the health provider institution, which are subcontracted by the EPS, or the health provider entities, which are the main insurance companies. Okay, they're bigger and they hire those IPS to do more specific and developed exams. Okay, so there are several types. In this case, we're going to find, or we're going to focus on these ones that are going to be described. The first one is the occupational health exam. Is to evaluate how your body is at, well, how the body of the person is at the moment, whether or not is affected in a way that enables the person to work. And therefore, the medical exam have a deep study, the focus on the possible risks that the job position due to their functions can trigger over the employee. And well, the effect is that it can have a compensation if in the future it's required. Then we have the entrance test, which is requested as soon as you start work here in order to in order for the person or the candidate to check if their body parts are fine. And that occupational risk insurer test done or developed by the ARLs are similar to the previous ones, but in this case is to identify how the person is diagnosed, occupation and professionally, to know the type of risks that can be undertaken in the future. Okay, so we compare this with the personal profile that we already developed before the recruitment and know if the person is able to develop these functions. Okay, periodic evaluation, okay, is a test that in LG we do it every 6 months, and well, this is done by the this is important to do, especially by the human resource manager, because it actually has to be done in order to make sure that everything is fine in terms of the blood test, the illnesses, and some body evaluations, for instance, optometry or the hearing capacity of the person. The ARL, or the occupational risk insurers, are going to be sending a health team as occupational health brigades. Okay. Now, finally, we have withdrawals. This is fundamental to develop since it can have two different types of backgrounds. First, it can be, or it can have a fair cause. When we fire the person, we have the choice, and it could be considered without a fair cause when the worker quits the job. Okay, and its function is we need to send the ex-employee go through this evaluation for its post condition after its contract. Okay, and well, if the results are good, nothing happens, of course. However, if in the test there's something bad or identified that is a deficiency, it is necessary to measure how much of responsibility we as our company are going to be taking towards it. Okay, the consideration in this case is that to be developed is optional by the employee. However, we as a company, we are required to do it. And it's important because then the ARL is going to send some inspection towards our occupational risks that we can handle for each job load, and to know if the conditions of the company are well, and the infrastructure in terms of height, weight, the ergonomics, for instance, the lights, as I told you, the fragrances, the chemicals, and all the equipment is the right one for each function in this case. So personal protection items are going to be classified according to the risk type developed by the occupational risk administrators. They're going to measure and determine the level of the risk, and they are going to be, let's say, they're going to act immediately whenever an accident happens. So that's why it is important to carry all the necessary documentation or health affiliation of the worker. Okay, the payment of this fund is done by both we as employers and the worker. Okay, and the amount is classified in accordance to the risk level. Okay, finally, we're going to move on to some enclosing considerations which are extra. So for example, in an internal auditory, documentation has to be in order. The CVs, documentation, the personality test, informed consents certification will need to appear and state that the person is well informed and be kept by the company for a minimum of 20 years. And why we have to do this? Well, we need to keep those documentations, because if there is a problem in the future, we can like for example, if the person doesn't know the calculation of their pension or the historical record, use it as a reference point to calculate the specific amount. And on the other side, if we are demanded by this person after working for us, there will be like a proof, let's say, that guarantees their status along the duration of the contract. So yes, this is highly important for us to be aware that everything was in order. Okay, how to save it? Well, there are saving formats. In this case, archival technicians from SENA can do this job, because they know how to recover them in case a problem in the system happens, and they are skilled enough to organize them in carpets in the computer, divided in specialties through some techniques and files knowledge that they already have. They know how to assign a specific time frame, classification, and allocation. For example, sometimes some documents or some papers need a hygrometer to measure humidity and keep safely some physical or original documents in order not to damage them in the long run, to assure the progress in the company. And of course, if the label ministry can develop an unexpected inspection, we have all the documentation necessary classified. And finally, we can have another extra consideration, which is the internal labor regulation. Okay, the main points are to consider that behavior concerns of penalty policy types and the process that is going to have. The participation involves the employer and the employee, since the worker has 20 days to revise this internal regulation and make objections if necessary, and sign it. Okay, well, the content of this internal labor regulation to be developed by us has to state the schedules, breaks, selection process development, as we could have seen today in this session, and many other important aspects of the job position and the company in general, in order for them to be aware and to have a pleasant experience and journey along the contract. Okay, so after all that being said, are you ready to take this personal selection procedure in terms of our 5 edges that our company takes? So let's review the recruitment, the confident employee, the legal security, the job references, the medical diagnosis are going to be compenetrated and make the best personal selection for the most qualified people in the world that we can select for the best progression of our company. Just hire the best people, okay? The worth professionalism categories professionals with high competitive advantages levels and not by affinity. Let's do not practice ever the nepotism that if references from Taylor recognize its inefficiency. Okay, so let's always look and seek for the best of the best and be complemented not only the cognitive part or intelligence but also the emotional, who is going to be the supporter and is going to complement the work itself. Okay, so I don't have anything more than just say thank you. And of course, if there is any doubt or any pending topic that you would like to ask me about, please contact me. These are my contact number as well as my email. I'll be really glad to answer your doubts. And well, I hope I see you again in another session. Thank you for your attention and your time throughout this presentation. I hope you liked it and enjoyed it as much as I did. Thank you, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.